Hopefully we're back. Hi Frankie, can you hear me? I don't know what happened there. Typical, it just absolutely crashed. Everybody hear me properly? Hopefully we're back this time. Connecting. Can't see anything. Hopefully we're back, surely. Just getting a message here from one of my mentees in the vegan Facebook group. Oh, try to catch up with all this. It's running me off my feet. Actually, as well, thanks to Kirsty Exford, she sent me this new book. They All Had Eyes. Confessions of a Vivisectionist. This'll be an absolutely great book. The little monkey cautiously looked up at me, meeting my eyes from his meek, downcast face. The gentle warmth of his petite brown hand could be felt through the latex glove as he held on to me for dear life. Tiny fingers and fingernails, much like a newborn infant, grasped onto my index finger as asking just for a moment of love, just a little attention from his little bigger cousin. It says it's an absolutely great book. It looks amazing. It's dedicated to the many animals whom I tortured and killed in the name of science. If there is hell, I will spend it forever looking into their eyes. That should be a great book. Yeah, vegan dreams, like I say, I do a lot of vegan activism. Obviously, I do look for Save Movement Scotland and such likes, and I do for Go Vegan Scotland. Like I say, I'm actually helping a lot of people at the moment. Helping people transition to the vegan lifestyle. It's called Challenge 22. It's a group on Facebook. They've got dietitians, we've got mentors, we've got professional cooks and such likes. So I'm actually a mentor to about 10 people in the group. Nice to see you here, Abercrombie and Snitch, sending you all my support as well. So this is over 22 days. So it actually started today. It started on the 3rd and it runs through to the 25th. This runs every single month and it's all free of charge as well. They get all this help. It's basically that each day they kind of do an awful lot of things, like obviously the pasta challenge. We help them do helping them know about the kind of additives that's obviously in food that may not be vegan and such likes. And we do like everything. It's total mentoring. I need help from you. Yeah, if you ever need help, let's see if you want. Actually, if you're actually on Facebook at all, if you look up Challenge 22 Plus, you'll actually find it. It's a great thing. You can actually sign up for it free of charge and such like. It's amazing. So we're back.
Oh my god, why does this I don't know why it's being so temperamental.
It just seemed to absolutely stop and just the whole chat broke up. I don't know what it was.
Just on what you were just saying, so we remember I put out that link about a petition to get better labelling. We talked about this a little bit last time, but I was thinking, so on things like LifeSum and MyFitnessPal, why don't we lobby them to get brands or to get people who are vegan to input to the app whether something's vegan or not, because then at least we've got a way of sharing that information. Thing is, I've got lots of, there are the usual sites like BUAV that give you some non-vegan brands and some vegan brands, but it's still pretty confusing when you're in the supermarket and actually looking to buy things. So if at least if people can get like a regular list of stuff that they know is good to go, like the basics,
Definitely.
then that makes it easier to start transitioning. I'm still definitely eating some additives and stuff that I'm just not aware are not vegan, because I find it so confusing. But maybe that would be a way to kind of get in to spreading some of that information, because a lot of people use those apps, don't they? Like you can scan the barcode and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's it. I mean, you've got a lot of hidden E numbers, and you've got things like the cochineal, and
Yeah.
you've even got things like isinglass and such like. So that's even in your alcohol and such, which a lot of people probably don't understand that. They're probably having alcohol at the weekend, and that's not
Yeah.
vegan either.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, it's a good if we could get a group of people together. I mean, we've got like everyone on vegan YouTube,
Yeah,
then we could change quite a substantial amount of those entries, because it's all user generated anyway. So if you scan
exactly.
something that's not in there, it will ask you to input the data, and you could put, even if you put in the title of it brackets vegan, then that would help, I think.
Yeah,
So yeah, maybe we should look at doing a campaign to kind of get people to be aware of that and start doing it.
definitely. I was actually thinking of doing like a kind of campaign that we should start to try and speak to like the kind of broadcasting companies and try to get them to actually have like more vegan adverts on TV for like the vegan companies. So maybe if people start seeing these in the mainstream, it may kind of get the message out there a bit more.
If we know, I mean, there must be people in the networks that we have who have the wherewithal to make decent broadcast quality ads. So even
Yeah,
if they just did it as a voluntary thing, I know it's quite a big deal, and it isn't, it wouldn't be free for them to do it, but it might be a way of giving some of those companies a bit of a leg up.
definitely.
So we could look into some of those things anyway. That would be cool. Did you want to?
100%.
Did you want to? Should we get into the interview? Should I give people
Yeah,
a bit of an
definitely.
overview
Let's do it.
of why I wanted to do this with you?
Yeah,
So this ages ago was something I came up with, and we never got around to organising a time to do it. I was quite
that's it.
nervous about it, but now that I know Tommy a bit better, it's much easier. So the idea was to try and show that adult ED sufferers are catered for in treatment, but not they're kind of treated like teenagers, because they don't have very good, I mean, there isn't that sense of parental responsibility that your parents can sign you in to inpatient, or
Yeah,
you can't be sectioned if you're over 18 unless you're really dangerously ill, and I mean near death. So part of talking about what it's like as an adult sufferer is geared towards trying to get some of those treatments to be a bit more inclusive.
yeah,
And also like the real nitty gritty stuff that we see in everyday situations. It's like a grim reality that people don't see that often. And I know you and I mean, that's basically what your channel is about. But
yeah, exactly.
so I just wanted to be able to do an interview so that I could kind of introduce people to you and to what we're trying to do. Like in a little interview that makes sense to people. So that's kind of that was the plan from my perspective. First question for you, Tommy, is what is the name? And forgive me, people on this broadcast probably will know the answers to a lot of these, but for the purposes of being able to share this more widely, what's the name and the nature of your eating disorder and the main characteristics for you? And so concentrate on things that people maybe wouldn't expect. Some of the, like the physical factors.
Yeah, well, obviously, the main diagnosis of my eating disorder is anorexia, but I obviously suffer with exercise athletica. I've had like binge purge type as well. I've been through like all the various types of eating disorders, so I suffer quite a varied kind of amount of different behaviours with my eating disorder. Basically, the main things that's obviously helped that's impacted my health with my eating disorder is I suffer with osteoporosis, which is thinning of the bones, which is basically a loss of calcium and such. I've actually suffered 2 heart attacks, basically because when you're suffering with an eating disorder, it uses muscle as obviously fuel, so that the first point of attack is obviously your heart. I've actually suffered with hypothalamus problems in my brain, obviously because of the lack of oxygen to my brain that actually brought about the eating disorder when I actually had a heart attack as well. the main things that I suffer with on day to day is obviously I suffer with obsessive compulsive disorder. I've got to be very, very rigid about what I do and what I eat, such as I've got to use the same utensils, like the same plate, the same knife and the same fork. I can't mix my food up, so say like I can't have the protein with obviously the carbohydrates all mixed up together. I've got to eat them separately. I've got to have my meals at a certain time of day. I've obviously got to do everything at a certain time of day, right down to having like going for a shower, going to the toilet and such likes. And basically, it takes over my thinking 24/7. I go to bed at night and I'm thinking about the next day, what I'm going to have, even through the week, what I'm going to have. And I even get to the point where I'm very, very rigid. Like I've got to have like a certain meal on a certain day. So say I've had like a stir fry on a Monday, and then I've got to have like peanut butter and just on a Friday and such. I won't eat it the rest of the week. So I'm very, very rigid about that.
So in terms of restriction, are you someone that has used fasting in the past, complete fasting for days and days, or have you had just a restriction of the number of calories, and how has that changed over time?
I've been through both of them actually. I was at the point where I would have nothing apart from coffee or like Pepsi Max and such to fuel myself through the day. I would get to the point where when I was starting to recover, well, I thought I was, my eating disorder kind of morphed itself and I was eating only like 500 calories a day. I would be like having an apple and a few rolls with a bit of meat on them and such. And I've obviously been at the point where I'll have like binging sessions. Like I would be restricting all through the week. I would get to the Sunday and I would be having like 8,000 calories a day. I would just keep eating so much.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. I feel like, I'm being an interviewer. I must be professional. It's quite hard because it's very emotive.
What you put
out. How old were you when all this started, and what was there a specific trigger for you? Was it a combination of things? I remember you saying it was to do with losing your mum and then also your dad as well. Maybe caused a relapse. But do you think you were kind of predisposed to it in any way, or did you have any other control issues or coping mechanisms, in other parts of your life?
Yeah, well, it started at obviously 17 years old when I lost my mum. My mum had been suffering with long-term ovarian cancer for having me in the womb. She obviously had the choice of having me and living with the cancer, or aborting me and obviously living with the cancer basically. So she obviously had me. She suffered many, many different cancers. She passed away when I was 17. I was a semi-professional footballer at the time, and actually I went away to Australia. I was away down to about 4 stone, and I was going, but they says to me, look, you can go, but you probably won't last the flight. So the way the flight arriving at Glasgow, I suffered a massive heart attack, and I was dead for 9 minutes. I was in a potassium coma for 3 months. But all through my life, I actually had suffered with things like obsessive compulsive disorder. I used to go like doing like up to 15 to 17 showers a day, constantly changing my clothes. I was a perfectionist in so many ways, and I think that made me kind of predisposed to having an eating disorder. And when I look back on it, I believe my mum had kind of eating disordered behaviours, because I remember her always cooking meals for me and my dad, and she wouldn't make meals for herself, and she would get up during the night and she would like kind of binge on things. Like she would make herself like a lot of fried food and eat chocolate and such. She would never really eat much in front of us, and I believe that maybe she did have a lot of eating disordered behaviours that never kind of manifested themselves as a full-blown eating disorder. But obviously as well, I suffered obviously relapses with my wife's ovarian cancer. She was misdiagnosed as polycystic ovarian syndrome. She had 4 miscarriages and ended up having a hysterectomy and such, so we can't have a family now. That was in 2002. I suffered a relapse in 2014 when my dad had a massive stroke and heart attack, brought on by obviously long-term diabetes. He actually had an amputation in his leg. But that time it actually really made me recover and do a lot more, because I got to the point where I went vegan at that point with my eating disorder recovery. I was in hospital there for 6 months. and it's helped me so much. But like I say, I've got a long way to go. I know that I've got another 20 kilograms to gain. I've actually gained roughly 16 kilograms since May last year, so it's progression in a good way. But I know that's only part of the journey.
Yeah, I think most people think that once your weight restored, then it's all right. You get sent back out into the community, and then that's when the tough stuff starts.
Exactly.
You've got to be really emotionally prepared to kind of challenge the things that have become so ingrained to you. But honestly, kudos for that amount of gain is amazing, and the fact that you're being so proactive about what you're doing. I really hope that will give you that kind of motivation to keep going, because you've got all of us behind you, and those of us who have been through similar experiences, we know how hard this is. Like, I'm kind of on the point of relapsing at the moment, and I'm just really sort of having an internal battle the whole time about it, because I want to be able to carry on with the achievements that I'd aimed to do. And I understand how difficult that is, but you really should be proud of yourself for how far you've come already.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate that.
So tell me about, you've already mentioned heart attacks and really serious illnesses that physically have been the side effects of having an ED. But is there anything that kind of affects you on a daily basis, and how do you have like ongoing treatment that deals with just that, or do you feel like you're ever ignored by medical professionals because they put everything down to the eating disorder, and they kind of in some ways make you feel like it's your fault, so they don't give you the treatment that you deserve?
Yeah, well, daily obviously I suffer with a lot of like stomach bloating, quite a lot every time I eat. I've actually suffered with gastroparesis, so basically that's a slowing of the emptying of the stomach. I can, not to be too graphic, but sometimes I can eat food and within 20 minutes it's straight out the other end. I get like constant diarrhea and such. I've actually suffered a prolapse bowel because of that as well. That was brought on with my eating disorder. Obviously as well, I say I do get a lot of things like I suffer a lot of medical conditions, but when I do go to the doctors, like you say, they basically put everything down to the eating disorder and they don't want to really do much for you. Like, if I get things like, I've suffered a lot of things that obviously to my heart and such likes, but they just keep saying to me, look, you know what you're doing yourself, only you can get it better, you can't repair the damage it's done, but you can stop it getting any worse. But like I say, they don't want to give you any treatment to it, but I do believe what they're saying. Yeah, you can obviously you can't repair the damage, but you can stop it getting worse, but it's basically like turning your way, like they don't care, like you're doing it to yourself, why should you bother?
That's another, Rethink, the charity Rethink Mental Illness did, and I think I mentioned this on the broadcast we did before, did a campaign about how people with schizophrenia, when they go and ask for medical help, they're normally sent away because doctors will assume that it's because they've got a mental health condition, that they're obviously not looking after themselves, which sometimes they're not, but that's part of their illness. And there's a real need for us to ask medical professionals to actually address those attitudes, because that is a real barrier for people getting better. And we're not looking after the most vulnerable people, and it's a travesty, frankly, in a civilized Western country where we like to think that you can fix anything. So lots of people go through their lives drinking and smoking and taking drugs and whatever, and they just tend to think that they'll deal with the consequences when they happen, and that they'll be able to just give you a heart bypass or something.
Exactly.
That's not as stigmatized as people like us who have an illness that means that our organs can be affected, but yet we're the people that find it the most difficult to get treatment. So that stigma is something that really needs addressing, and hopefully conversations like this can add weight to that.
Also as well, what I've found as well when you're talking about that, about getting treatment is really, really hard, because most of the time it's a psychiatric unit you actually get put into, and there's only like a few actual places, like the Priory in Glasgow and one in Aberdeen, and then you've got Rhodes Farm down in England, and even that you've got to get specialist NHS funding, and it's like 5 beds, so you've got to be lucky to even get in there to get the help that you really, really need.
Yeah, I mean, when I was 21, the first time I was properly diagnosed, my mum had driven me up to Roehampton. I was living in Somerset because that's where I'm from, and there was this Professor Hubert Lacey, who had a specialist eating disorders unit and treated people that had a lot of self-harm issues as well, which
Yeah,
seems odd because most people that have an eating disorder will likely have like self-harm as one of the behaviours that they do
yeah,
as a coping mechanism more than anything else. And he said, yeah, definitely you need to be in here, come and live here for like 4 months, and then you'll do a year of outpatients. So you'll have to move to Roehampton on your own. And I was 21. I'd been living away from home for a long time, so I had lots of trouble kind of dealing with family life. And we had to go back and get the funding, and it took the NHS, I think it was 6 months it took them to approve, because they said it was going to cost like £60,000 just for 4 months in this place, where you wouldn't, it put me off because they gave me a tour of the facility, and there was the toilet door was locked all the time, so if you wanted to go, you had to go
yeah.
and ask for the key,
That's
and then
right.
someone would have to stand outside. And it felt to me so dehumanizing that because I wasn't sectioned, I basically sacked it off and didn't go. And there's still part of me that wonders whether that would have actually even helped me, because although it would have helped me gain weight, I don't know if it would have really helped with my outlook on life. I would have felt trapped, and I would have felt like there was no, every day was kind of the same in a place like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
I
the
was,
funding is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And luckily
yeah,
I'm in a position now where I've got private healthcare. Obviously I pay for it, but
that's great.
even now I've come to the end of what they will allow under my cover. So if I want anything else, I have to pay for it myself. And it's just not doable for us, is it, to come up with hundreds of thousands of pounds just to
No,
get the treatment we need. Whereas if you had cancer or something, I mean, obviously some drugs are not available on the NHS, and people fight against that a lot. But
exactly.
most of the time, if you relapse with cancer, they're not going to say, "Oh, sorry, you've used up your quota. That's it. Get lost." But
And
there's no parity for mental health. There's no kind of, and especially for eating disorders, I think, because it is seen to be more self-inflicted than something like schizophrenia or bipolar, I think.
it's like AJ says there, sometimes there's a stigma of it being a choice. That's exactly what you're saying there, yeah.
And people like Julian Ryder really don't help when they say things like he said, that, that it is a choice. And then, the reason, so the situation I had recently with Aysel Mazard, who
Uh-huh.
basically said that I was attacking what he said out of some malice. But what he doesn't realize is the reason I was attacking what he said was because what he said was wrong. And it does promote this idea that mental illness means that you're not of value to society, and you can't have a life that would be on any level like somebody else's life. And it's not through malice that I want to disagree. It's just because it's wrong. It's factually incorrect. And I found out since I was researching that I think it was the Prime Minister of Norway who went off for a period on sick leave for depression, and then
Yeah.
he was voted back in again afterwards. And so it's a nonsense. Everything that he said was a nonsense. But yeah, if you're questioning it as someone with an eating disorder, they will still try and use how you can't be in your right mind because your brain is starved. That comeback, which is just such a damaging thing. Anyway, I won't go off on a rant about that
Vegan
again.
James
But
is saying Isel sometimes does not like to be wrong, I guess. The real Lady Lou says, what did Isel say, if anybody knows?
and he's addressed this a few times. He made a few videos recently that happened to pop up in my on my homepage on YouTube, where he was basically saying that we can't have people with mental illnesses as part of the political
Yeah, one of
campaign
them was
for
directed at
veganism.
me.
Yeah, one of them was directed at Tommy, and he was also referencing the guy who had tried to stab himself on camera, and saying, we can't have these people representing the vegan campaign because they're unreliable. And that seemed to be the only thing that he could drum up was that he thought it was made us unreliable. So he was discounting a whole section, in fact 1 in 4 people that probably watches his video, because that's the statistics. That's, 25% of people will be diagnosed or will have a mental health problem at some point in their lives, whether it's diagnosed or not. And he then went on to say that politics is nasty and you need to be able to cope with the nasty stuff. But if anybody says anything that's not even nasty but just disagrees with him, he goes on the attack and he starts throwing around words like malice and defamation. And so he's kind of proven himself to be one of the people he's saying is not reliable, because he rises to the bait every time and shouts at people on live broadcasts and doesn't behave like a grown man. So,
it's got to the point I can't actually go into certain comment sections like Mod Vegan or such likes, because he attacks me right away. He starts saying that I've tried to slander him, and I've never actually spoken back to him at all. But his kind of he said his exact words about me was, "I'm stupid. I'm mentally insane. I can't play politics and I shouldn't be a vegan activist because vegan activism is politics and it's a game that I can't play." He says that you should stick to field sports. He says even then that...
snowboarding. We're allowed to do snowboarding, apparently.
That's it.
Well, that's great, because I have the worst balance in the world, so that's not going to work for me. But really, it's just, he's obviously... We talked about this a bit last time, and I don't like to psychoanalyze people, but he has referenced his cousin, who he said was clinically insane, which, by the way, unless it's different in Canada, that's not a thing. No one declares you clinically insane. They may say you lack mental capacity if you're having an episode and you're taken to court for something to stand. They might say you don't have capacity to stand trial, or that at the time of the crime you didn't have capacity to know what you were doing. But it's the idea of him saying that he's taken that situation that he had with his cousin, and we don't really know what happened. I would never like to speculate on what happened, but it obviously wasn't good. And he's taken that experience and sort of overlaid it onto everyone that has a mental illness is like this, which, we know. It's like he addresses everyone as if vegans should all be the same. We should all be all in agreement about all of the things that he says. And that's ridiculous, because, I've made videos in support of some of his arguments against freely enduring murder and the way that they handle things and the way that they put the message out there. And but that doesn't mean to say that that I'm on side with him and I should then therefore agree with everything automatically. So but it's just so obviously bananas of him to say it. And the only reason I made that video in response is because I wanted people that watched that video and thought that what he was saying had any validity to come and hear it from the mouth of someone who is living proof that it's rubbish, and you're living proof of it too. So I'm not saying that everybody with a mental illness is like me and can do it, but then every person that doesn't have a mental illness isn't capable of doing politics either, and some people don't want to. So it's it's
exactly. You do a lot. You do a lot at Parliament and things like that as well, and you've spoken quite a lot, and I've done that as well. So I said, it's the way he put it that things like dyslexia, autism, eating disorders, schizophrenia, he says they're all one of the same. That they're all
mental disabilities.
They're far from that.
Yeah, and I feel like if he was to question my right to point out that mental disability isn't this one sort of homogenous category, my job is in disability. It's in the disability sphere. So a lot of what I do is around very specific needs for people with specific disabilities. Yeah. Effectively, I manage very, very large IT systems that organizations use to do various things, plus their, like customer facing websites. I help those projects be accessible to people that have disabilities. So if you're like a visually impaired person and you use a screen reader, so you don't see the screen, you don't use a mouse, you navigate using a keyboard, and you have the text read out to you, if a website is not designed with that in mind, then it won't work, and that means those customers will disappear and go somewhere else.
Exactly.
So that's my day job, and I've done that for 10 years now in that sort of field. So I know my stuff when it comes to disability, and activism around disability is something I've been doing for a long time. So if he wants to start picking up on the individual conditions, then I don't think it's going to work. He's just he hasn't done his homework, and there you go. So his argument's going to fall flat from the beginning. But it does, yeah. I mean, it's very difficult to convince a lot of people, and I think that's because lots of stuff that you see. So there was a news story actually just yesterday where I think a psychiatric patient had taken a doctor hostage somewhere. I didn't see what happened.
I caught a little bit of that, but I didn't get the whole story.
But that's actually, you wouldn't say, if it was any other sort of patient, you wouldn't say, you wouldn't probably name that they were in a, I don't know,
like one of these kind of high dependency.
Yeah, you wouldn't. It just isn't relevant. But people still report on this stuff in a very irresponsible way, and that's one of the things the charity I work for does, is to try to educate the media so that they portray mental illness not as people who are violent and dangerous, but as people who are more like to be victims of people who are violent and dangerous. So yeah, I mean, it's I suppose it's unsurprising that people do have that idea about mental illness, but you don't have to look very far to find evidence to the contrary. So everybody has a responsibility to make sure that they're not ignorant to these things. And I's always ignorant about these things, unfortunately.
Definitely. It's like I always say, just because you've got a mental illness doesn't mean you're a bad person. Bad people are people, and you get bad people with mental illness, you get bad people that are, for whatever you may call it, normal.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we got massively off topic again.
Yeah.
But that's someone asked, so I'm always willing to highlight that situation, because I think it's really important that we represent the truth and not kind of waste energy arguing about things with people that are not willing to educate themselves. So where do we get to? This is a bit of a departure of a question, but how do you feel when you first wake up, both physically and mentally?
When I first wake up, I really feel drained in such ways. I just think to myself, have I got to face another day with an eating disorder? And sometimes it's a tormenting thing. I get days where I can have a lot of energy and want to get out of bed. Other days it's really forced to get out of bed, and I know I've got to do it. Like, the only thing that keeps me going is my wife being here and my animals, and knowing I've got to get up and do things for them. If I was probably myself, I'd probably just lie there and let the world fade away, I think.
Yeah. I think that's another thing that we touched on in last time, was like motivation and how you get yourself through when, I mean, it does become about the people that you love rather than yourself, because
exactly.
I think you get to a certain point in life where you think, well, I honestly don't care that much what happens to me, but I do care about the pain that other people might feel if I'm not here 100%. Or if I'm sick. But again, it's not you can't just magic yourself better because you know those people care about you. It's not that easy, and I think people do assume that it's possible to do that, especially for children. So I've got a 3-year-old son, and when he was born, I'd had to be very, very well. I'd coped with a lot of having to eat when I didn't want to, and seeing my body change shape when I was pregnant, and then having him and just feeling the worst I've ever felt. And I had postnatal depression as well. So, people said to me, well, surely now you've had him, you've got no reason to carry on. It's like, well, it's an illness. It's not a choice.
Exactly.
But I'm glad that you do have people around you that support you, and it is important to keep that in mind, because it's the only thing sometimes that keeps you going.
It's just like they say to people. I saw a video the other day by the vegan YouTuber. I don't know if you know him, Juice.
No.
He actually made a video talking about this little girl on the internet. It was a video on the internet. She'd actually committed suicide, and he made a video slamming it, and he went into the comment section, and he was giving the family quite a bit of kind of abuse about it. And he said basically it's one of the worst things that you can possibly do because it's nothing more than absolute selfishness to do that. But like I says, yeah, you may think it's selfish, but it doesn't cure obviously the problems. People see that as their way out. Obviously, it hurts the family that leave behind.
Yeah.
But people don't do that out of selfishness. It's because they see that as their only way out. And to actually know what people's going through and actually educate yourself about it first before you actually done something like that and jumped in there and kind of said they kind of comments.
I don't know why people feel the need to do that. I think it has to be coming from a place of anger about something that's happened to them, or that they, I don't know. I think maybe sometimes people want to know why people do it, and they can't understand it, and it makes them annoyed that they can't understand it. So they kind of go around like poking people to try and understand it. And I think it's a bit of a weird way of going about it. But I think there is definitely something about that underlying when people, like they do it out of pure pain. Exactly. People who feel like, so people that do go through with suicide, and there are so many uncompleted suicides that don't get talked about because, people see suicide attempt as purely, a cry for help, when it can be, but it's also more likely to be that someone was in so much pain that at that time they couldn't see what else they could do. And I do have the belief that for some people, they will feel that pain for their whole lives. It doesn't matter how much treatment they go through or what medication they take, they will always be struggling. And I can see why you would want that to end. A lot of people that I know have family members that have committed suicide, and most of the time, when that person does that, it can come from nowhere. It seems like it comes from nowhere, but in actual fact, they've been wearing that brave face for so long because they don't want to hurt the people around them. So it's not at all selfish.
My uncle, when you said that, my uncle actually did commit suicide. I've never actually discussed this ever before, but this is something I've never told anybody. My uncle actually did it, and what actually happened was he'd been working away, and he was in a high-paid job and things. He was the manager of a big coal mine and such, earning a lot of money. He had a big, for all intents and purposes, a great life, big house, everything. He actually went away out, went to his work. He went to the chemist, and he actually said to them that he needed special dispensation for his doctor because he was actually going away to Mexico for, I think it was like 4 weeks, he said, and needed 4 weeks of medication. So they went and gave him the medication. He went home, he took the whole dose of the medication, to come back in at night after a cleaning job, found him lying dead. And it makes you wonder. Like I say, he'd done everything. He'd actually cashed in all his money. He bought himself a new suit and everything, and then took all the medication and just killed himself.
I mean, often people don't. I don't know. I mean, maybe he felt like so many other men do, that it's just not something that men want to talk about because they will be aware that other people might judge them and think they're weak. So most people that commit suicide are male. That's a fact, and they're below I think it's like this. Isn't it the second biggest cause of death for men under the age of 25 worldwide? Yeah. Which is shocking because think it's actually the biggest thing.
It's actually the biggest part of what people die with eating disorders, because most of them actually commit suicide.
Yeah. So it's terrible that we have this kind of society where men don't feel like they can ask for help. So thank you for talking about that, Tommy, because it's not an easy thing to even think about. And your family's been through so much. It's just, it's really tough, and there's not really any words that I can say to make that any better. But just carry on doing what you're doing, because that is going to help other people who feel as desperate as your uncle must have done. Where are we? Is that your phone? I keep thinking maybe it's
Yeah, my foot. It's because I'm in this challenge mentor 2 group
oh
that for
right, so it's
vegan.
your is it
That
your
this is the day it actually starts up. So they're constantly battering messages through, and it's keeps coming off the loop.
You're responsible for all these people becoming vegan, Tommy. It's like
Oh, it's been all night, and that's people.
I'll have to sign up for it. I think it would be quite good. Although,
I actually had one earlier. She stays in the Philippines. She says my country is very very much a meat eating culture. She actually was asking me. She's managed to stop all the red meats, but because of where she lives, she can't actually stop chicken. So she was asking for a lot of ideas. So I've had to try and kind of look into things on the internet about the kind of resources for in the Philippines for the vegan kind of vegan lifestyle and such, because I really don't know much about the kind of vegan Filipino culture, to be honest.
that's another bit of stuff that's missed out of veganism, especially on YouTube, I think, is that people just assume that other people have access to all the same things that they do and that their
Exactly.
lifestyles are the same as theirs. And, like, what it's like in Britain to try and get decent quality fruit from anywhere. It's
Well,
all
exactly.
massively expensive. I still can't believe how much blueberries cost because it just is extortionate and I
About
never want
three,
them.
three pound, £3 for a wee 100 gram
I know,
punnet.
ridiculous. Oh, actually, AJ just said in the chat, men also tend to think it's not manly to show emotion, but guys feel too, and that of course is true because
Exactly.
we're all human and we all feel, and we all have a right to express how we feel. Some of us are able to do it through creative means, and a lot of times, especially in the music world, I know a lot of people that have. On my previous life doing music, I have a lot of people that have very up and down moods, and sometimes they can help themselves through doing music. But I think, like with Kurt Cobain, for instance, he was someone who felt like
Yeah.
he had dealt with the pain for as long as he could, and he just didn't want to do it anymore. So
Michael
it can
Hutchins was
help.
another one, isn't he?
Yeah. And also, it's very, when you get to a point where you're so depressed that you can't be creative, that is very debilitating. If you're someone that does that, that's your job and that's your world and that's what you've always done. And I've been going through that a bit at the moment because I'm not able to do music. I haven't really been motivated to do any for such a long time. Part of that is to do with the fact that I've got a young child, but that's why I'm trying to do YouTube and write more, because that does feel doable.
Exactly.
So yeah, and poetry, AJ said, is a good way of
I'm,
getting
a,
the thoughts
I'm
out.
actually I'm actually great at poetry and such, but I've lost quite a lot of doing it, obviously because of my eating disorder, and it's the same with things like art as well. I'm really good at doing art, and I haven't done that in years as well. I can do a lot of things like oil paints and such, but it's trying to get the
It will,
focus to do it.
yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there'll be times in your life again when you will pick that back up and you'll get a lot of joy out of doing it. But you do have to feel in the mood to do it. It's not something you can really force, is it? So,
Data says, do you find listening to music helpful? I think it tends to uplift my mood. Yeah, definitely. I definitely do. Do you?
it depends, doesn't it, really, though, on what music you listen to? Because sometimes I'll deliberately listen to music that makes me feel very emotional and sad, just so I
Yeah,
can
I was
let
going to
some of
say
it
that.
out.
Yeah,
But
especially
there's a lot of
see around the times of my anniversaries of my parents passing, I'll listen to kind of like emotional music because I feel that it will get the tears and the emotion out. That's exactly what you're saying there.
yeah, yeah. It is good to listen to sad music. Kale Saitan, I like your name as well. You're like the healthiest name here. um,
Yeah,
I remember actually after my mum died, about 6 months afterwards, we did a memorial service for her at a cathedral, our local cathedral, because she was a teacher. She'd been a head teacher, but she'd been teaching for 25 years. So she was seen as someone who was enough of a pillar of the community that they would allow us to have a service there. And about 500 people showed up for this, and I had to sing and then play the violin, and it was like I had to just switch off from being there. So I don't really even remember that much about it, because
yeah,
if I had connected with it at all, I don't think I would have coped emotionally with doing, like the things that I emote through, which is music.
Exactly.
In that context, is just, it would have opened the floodgates, and I kind of thought that I would never be able to deal with it. But I actually used some hypnotherapy CDs to sort of reduce my anxiety so that I could do that, and it worked pretty well. But there's a lot of new research on, I think they found what they say is the piece of music that most reduces anxiety for people. So there's a lot of work going on around that, and that's something that I have had a few ideas about. So I'm currently I've got my very best friend is someone, he's an extremely clever graduate of physics from Oxford, who is also like a developer, so he can code. And we're working on a project together. So if we ever get that off the ground, that's kind of related to that. But I've got to keep that secret. Let's go back to our questions. Excuse me, by the way, I've got a cold, so I'm sniffing. And
I had it as well for about 3 or 4 weeks, and it went away and come straight back.
I know. I think I eat a lot of ice lollies, so I don't think that really helps. And I've got a bit of an issue with ice lollies, as in I'm eating like 10 of them a day, but they're only, because they're safe food again, like they're only 17 calories each, and it takes a long time to chew on a bit of ice. So yeah, exactly. I need to try and not buy them, but it's too difficult. So the next question was, does your family do anything differently because of your eating disorder, and what do you feel like you've missed out on anything to do with family life because of it?
Well, obviously, Laura does a lot differently. She's basically, she worries about things to obviously what and when to say to me. I don't know if you've ever had this, like you constantly say to your partner or anybody around you, do I look as if I'm gaining weight, or do I look as if I'm healthy and such? Laura will never comment on that because she knows automatically that's my disorder. I want her to say that I look healthier and trigger onto it. Basically, that will say, oh, that means you're fat. It's obviously taken a lot of things away from me in the past. Obviously, we couldn't obviously go out and do social events because you were obviously scared to go out to restaurants because you didn't know the certain amount of calories, or you didn't know if food was going to be involved. I stopped obviously doing the things that I love, like obviously going to like football or doing things like art or anything like that, because it was hard to even concentrate because your starved body's a starved brain as well. And it's took so much away from me. But recently, obviously, I'm getting back into doing all the kind of things I love, but it still gets some days where I'm stuck in that kind of bubble and I don't want to do anything because it's your eating disorder is basically your identity. You don't want to, you get this fear of obviously losing it because you don't know who you're going to become if you don't have your eating disorder.
Yeah.
And it puts an awful lot of strain on obviously your marriage as well. It really, really does. And Laura deserves the world for putting up with me. She really does, because I don't know if you've ever had this. Sometimes you get to the point when you know when your family or anything are trying to help you, but your eating disorder lashes out at them. You'll say to them, look, just get away, all you're worrying about is making me fat. But that's not you saying that, that's the eating disorder. And you feel like absolutely shit and you hate yourself for it because you're lashing out at the people you love. And I have done that in the past.
Have you? So I don't know how you met your wife, but you've been married 10 years, and I suppose like now people get married later and later, and I wasn't even in a relationship that had, the longest relationship I'd ever had was about 2 years before I met my husband, and I was just about to turn 30 when I met him. We've been together 7 years now, but I just can't imagine having, obviously you guys have got such a strong relationship. So you've been through such a lot together. How did you meet her? And did you already have your disorder by that point? And how did you communicate that to her?
Well, I met her in 2002 it was, we met up. I was actually on a works night out with my work, and she was on a works night out with her work, and we met away and we get chatting, and we never thought we'd meet each other again. And the next week, you're going to not believe this was the most fatest thing ever. I actually got a phone call on my mobile phone, and it was actually Laura, but she'd actually get the wrong number because I never gave her my number. She was actually looking for somebody else, and I get chatting away to her, and I says, "Were you not the person I actually spoke to that last week there?" And she says, "Yeah, I was." So we started meeting up just regularly as friends over the next 7, 8 months, and we basically became friends, and it just gradually improved onto obviously a relationship. And then obviously we started going out. We get married in 2002. No, 2006. Sorry, what am I saying? 2002. It was 2002 we met. We married in 2006. And at the very, very start, I didn't obviously tell her about eating disorder because I'd actually recovered at that point. I was back up to my set point weight. I was up to about 12 and a half stone, which that may sound a lot for people, but I can guarantee you that is the optimal for my weight because I was actually 13 and a half stone as a footballer. I'm actually 5'10", so that was absolutely great. But I never really let her know about my eating disorder up until a bit. She started obviously relapse, with problems with the ovarian cancer, and then obviously my eating disorder kind of started to manifest itself, and I actually told her about it, and my eating disorder team had actually come back to me at that point, and they actually told her everything about things, and Laura was supportive so much, and she says, "Why didn't you tell me way back at the very start when we met?" She says, "I would have never thought any less of you." She says, "I love you for who you are." She says, "Your illness doesn't define you." And I'd always worried about that because I thought she would hate me and not want anything to do with me.
That's such a lovely story. It's like fate.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It's weird how things happen like that sometimes. So my husband was back when I was living in Somerset, and I was probably like in my late teens, early 20s, and he was only about 16. So when you're that age, it's quite a big gap. So yeah. He used to come and watch my band play because I was in a band, and we used to play at his town, which was like 30 minutes drive from where I lived. But you had to drive everywhere to kind of get around in Somerset because it's like rural. So I'm just going to grab the power. I just noticed my laptop's about to die. But yeah, so he was just one of the other drunk kids that always came to the shows, and I didn't really know him that much. I didn't talk to him. I knew who he was. I recognised him. But then he'd come to a gig a bit later on before I was just about to move to London, and we had like talked properly for the first time, but there wasn't anything going on at that point. And then, so 7 years ago, he got back in touch with me on Facebook, and I knew that I sort of recognised him, but I couldn't remember why. And I didn't really remember who he was. But then when we just met up, we were both doing self-employed job, so we had flexibility in the hours we were doing, and we met up in a pub and got horribly drunk, and that was it. We were kind of inseparable from then. So yeah, it was really weird because I did know him from a long time ago, but not really. And then for him to be also in London,
isn't it?
I know, it's very odd. And I think he is not very into talking about emotional stuff, but he has supported me, and it's been hard, like especially when you have a child, everything becomes 10 times harder, especially, like, because you do feel like you've got to give them what you never had and all that sort of stuff. So we'd have to have him through, not really at the time that we were expecting to. We'd only really just got together when I found out that I was probably going to have problems getting pregnant, and I don't know if that was anything to do with my eating disorder. But so we ended up having to just decide either to go for IVF or to discount ever having kids, and I knew that I wanted to do it. So there was a really rough patch where he was kind of deciding whether that was something he wanted to do, and it's still quite early on in our relationship. So, and then our house burnt down, and then if you watch my channel, you'll see I've done a few videos about all of that stuff. I'll do one about the IVF at some point. But we kind of got through all of that stuff very early in our relationship, and it sort of cemented us together. I think, like you say, he hasn't found it easy at all dealing with me, and I know that I'm, apart from the fact that I've sort of not had the ability to have a social life for a long time, I am probably quite a moody person because he's the person I'm closest to. I tend to like let my guard down a lot more here when I'm at home. So I feel
Yeah, I
like
can relate
he
to
gets
that.
it in the neck when he shouldn't, you know. And he's just,
Exactly.
the fact that he puts up with it, he's amazing. But you know, I'm very lucky to have him. But it is funny how these things come about. And I, you know, like with all the other relationships I'd had before, I'd got to about 2 years down the line and just gone, I'm just not really having fun or enjoying this anymore. But
Yeah.
with him, it's just been so, since all that drama has stopped happening and we're a bit more settled, we just are very tolerant of each other, I think, and that's something that is vital to make a relationship
That's
work.
good. Fat guy says wait. So having a BF isn't part of social life. I don't understand.
Well, it is, but we, like, what I mean is so before I relapsed last, we used to go out with our mates quite a lot. We had like a circle of mates who were also all people that used to come to my gigs. So I kind of reintegrated back with these people that I hadn't seen for so long. But they're a very stable group of friends as well. Like, they all are very close and they have been for years. And so we used to go out with them quite a lot. But then because of my eating disorder, everything involved food and drink, and I just didn't want to have to
Yeah,
deal with
me
that.
too.
So I don't stop him going from going out. He still goes out, but it does make it more difficult
And
because some way
when you're,
the
when
only
you're
person
talking
to
about that,
see.
like I always say, you've got to have your own interests and basically not be together 24/7, because you've got to be able to, like, you do your thing, you do your thing, and go your separate ways at certain
Yeah,
times. Because when you're tied together constantly in a marriage, I think that's a lot of the times where things actually can end up deteriorating.
yeah, definitely. And that's probably what went wrong in my previous relationships, was that we were just in each other's pockets all the time. But yeah, I mean, I need a lot of alone time, and that's one of the reasons that I'm going for an assessment
Yeah,
for autism, is because I cannot cope with people for a long time. So I do most of my socializing online and most of my communicating online, where I can think about what I'm going to say before I say it. And, you know, it does make it easier. The fact that he's out of the house quite a lot with work and I work from home. So I do get that bit of breathing space where I need to sort of decompress some of the things that have been stored up. Um, so
see,
yeah,
I do suffer a lot with like social anxiety. I'm really bad in crowds, and even, which you wouldn't believe, speaking in somebody on a phone. I can't lift a phone and speak to anybody.
right.
Laura would tell you this. My wife would tell you this, because I come across as I'm able to speak to people online perfectly, and I can speak to people face to face. But lifting a phone like that, the words can't come out, and I get
It's funny,
really,
isn't
really
it?
anxiety.
So many people, even people that don't have anxiety around phones. I don't know what it is about phones that I think for me,
I
it's that
know.
if I can't see somebody, in some ways, it should be easier, because then it means I don't have to read their face or anything. But there's something about it. I never know when it's my turn to speak. So there's long pauses in a conversation, and
Yeah,
I think I mean, I do it online a bit as well. You might have noticed that I do interrupt quite a bit. That's because as soon as a thought comes into my head, I have to make it come out of my mouth. Like, I don't really have like there's nothing in between those two things. So on the phone, it's impossible because I have nothing to go on. Like, I don't know when that person's going to speak.
exactly.
But yeah, I wonder why it is that so many people have an issue with phones.
Patty Halivivo says I'm bipolar too. I don't really know a great deal about bipolar as much. Do you know a lot about that? And
Bipolar is
I know it's like elevated, like feeling really, really high and then really, really low.
yeah, so there's something called cyclothymia, which is like bipolar, but it's more rapid cycling. So mood could go from being very high to being very low, but in a shorter amount of time. With
Right,
bipolar, what often happens is that you will get elevated to the point where, and for a beginning part, it will normally feel really good, and you'll feel really like focused and productive, and it is quite it's a very up feeling, and then that will go beyond the point where it's productive, and it just goes into having delusions. some paranoia, perhaps, like you will be convinced that things are happening that are not happening. And then after that, so it kind of reaches a climax, and then you'll just fall back down the curve and go into a really deep depression. Sometimes these cycles can last weeks or months. Everybody's different in how that cycle works, but it is fairly responsive to medication. So what tends to happen is you take the medication and it kind of stabilizes things, but people do miss that up. They miss the elevated part, and they feel like they're not getting that the bit before the high where they do their best thinking sometimes.
Yes.
Understandably, people tend to go off their medication if they feel like they're missing something, or they feel, people often say that they just feel like a zombie. They don't really they're just not really them. So it's difficult to get people to stay on their meds.
Bulimia and anxiety and panic attacks. I think that's probably all interconnected in a lot of ways, actually, with obviously with the bipolar, and it's probably the bulimia is a bit of like a kind of precursor to that as well. They do say it's all kind of correlated in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But I mean, often people with bipolar can be very stable for a very long time, and then something might happen that just will trigger an episode. And it's sometimes you go for years on the same dose of a medication, and then something will happen and you'll need to increase it or decrease it, and it can take a while at the beginning to get the dosage right. So the problem comes when someone's diagnosed and then they're trying out the medication. It can be really difficult dealing with the physical and emotional side effects that come with that. So a lot of people will sort of sabotage it because they don't like those. Obviously, it's a horrible thing to have. So it's difficult to get people on a good medication schedule that works. But once you're there, people can be very stable. I don't know if anyone's watched Homeland. On Homeland, the main protagonist, Carrie Matheson, she works for the CIA, and she's got bipolar, and it's something that's the whole premise of the show is based around the fact that she's bipolar, and she feels that she does her best thinking like on the way up of that elevated state. So there's a few things during the series that happen where she's been hiding the fact that she's bipolar from the CIA because, as I'm sure Isa would love me saying this, they do want you to be 100% like past all of the medicals to be someone that's trusted with state secrets. But anyone could go through an episode at any time. You don't have to be bipolar. You might not even know you're bipolar, and then you join. But the point is that the series kind of challenges that people that have mental illnesses can be extremely good at whatever it is that they do, but the payback for that is almost, they have to deal with this. Sometimes it gets a bit out of control, and I don't know why they paint it in that way, because that's most of the time it's just you're just a normal person like everyone else. That you have episodes of being up and down, but a lot of people with bipolar also have a very high IQ or are very talented in one area, just like everyone else. So, the soldier guy also in Homeland. So he's not the main guy. If you go past season 1 and 2, it's all about her and the fact that she's bipolar. This is if you go on Netflix and you read like the description of what Homeland is, that's kind of the premise of the show. So on the one hand, I think it's really good that they've put someone as a main character in a role, that she has a mental illness as part of the role. Yeah. But I would have liked it to have been like an aside. So it's like using someone who is a wheelchair user in a show because they're playing someone in a wheelchair, rather than like the woman in Silent Witness, who's someone I know actually, who has disabilities, and they just happen. It's just by chance, so they don't reference her disability in the show. It's just like she's a character, but then she also happens to be disabled. I think this is what we need to start seeing in the media and in like TV shows. But yeah, so yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, Homeland. But yeah, I mean, I've got a friend who actually works at MI5 and who had bipolar and was completely, wouldn't take his medication at all when we were teenagers. And there were many incidents where he was having an episode and we had to kind of chase him through the night across the moors to kind of get him back. But yeah, sorry, I'm not saying anything about that other than she's the main character, but it kind of says that from the beginning. I'm not going to tell you anything about what happens. Sorry, Patty was saying, someone asking something about. So Patty says you're bipolar and who have you been keeping it from? I'm just trying to follow what you're saying. For attention only. Who thinks you're lying? That is something that does happen, isn't it? Like, it's like when someone who's overweight talks about having an eating disorder, you see people going, oh, don't be ridiculous, you haven't got an eating disorder, because they don't understand that you can have an eating disorder that makes you overeat instead of undereat. Rude fat guy. Well, no, not necessarily. Lithium is the drug that they use to treat bipolar, but then often you will have to have other meds as well. But like I said, it takes people a while to get stabilized on medication.
Oh. What happened there? Can everybody hear me? Something just dropped there for some reason. Signal dropped again. I'll refresh.